Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm Mac.
And I'm Marion. We're here to help you cut through the noise and get to the heart of complex ideas using the sources you bring us.
Absolutely. Today we're doing a deep dive into some really thought-provoking source material excerpts from a book called Unscripted: The Great Rat Race Escape by MJ DeMarco.
And this deep dive is specifically for you if maybe you're relatively new to thinking about entrepreneurship.
Right.
Maybe you've spent a long time in a traditional job, playing by the usual rules, and you're starting to feel that little pull, that curiosity about, well, charting a different path.
But you're not quite sure where to even start, perhaps.
Exactly, that kind of feeling.
So our mission today is to really unpack the core arguments and strategies presented in these sources. We want to see what it actually means, according to this material anyway, to potentially escape the rat race and build towards financial freedom.
Let's get into it.
Okay. So diving right in, the source material starts with, well, it paints a pretty vivid picture of the conventional path.
Right, the path most people follow. The author calls it the rat race, or the scripted life.
Scripted, yeah.
And the underlying idea here, the source calls it the conventional wisdom principle, is basically that if you follow the path everyone tells you to take,
Get good grades, go to college.
get that good, stable job, save, 10% of your paycheck for 50 years, then you'll end up with a conventional sort of average life.
And the source argues, quite forcefully actually, that this conventional life is often really a form of servitude.
Servitude, that's a strong word.
It is, where your life and your time are largely dictated by, well, often an unfulfilling job.
And it uses that story of Jeff Trotman to make this point really hit home, doesn't it?
It really does. Jeff, waking up at 5:34 a.m., already dreading the commute, feeling like a rat on a wheel, just paying bills.
Stuck in a job that feels meaningless, yeah. And even his marriage is suffering.
Right. That specific, almost mundane discomfort, the source highlights that feeling of pretending everything's okay while, deep down you're not happy. That really brings the idea of servitude to life.
It does. And it's not necessarily like extreme hardship, which is why the source calls it comfortable pain.
Comfortable pain.
Yeah, it's this insidious idea that a life of moderate comfort, you've got the steady job, the regular paycheck, maybe some distractions on the weekend to cope.
Things to look forward to, briefly.
Exactly. But that very comfort can be like a silent disease that slowly poisons your dreams, your ambition.
Wow. And it describes the standard work week, the 5-day, 40-hour thing, as a scripted tool for obedience and complacency.
Yeah, basically designed to keep you just comfortable enough so you don't, rock the boat or look for something else.
And tied into this is the someday principle.
Oh, yeah, the someday trap.
I'm waiting until my next vacation, or I'm waiting until retirement, or someday I'll finally start that thing I want to do.
The source is really blunt about this one. It says, someday is a bribe to pacify your soul. A big fat lie that's birthed in Latersville that dies in Neversville.
That's harsh.
It is. The message is clear. If you don't make someday happen today, the timing is never going to feel perfect. It'll likely just never happen.
So the author takes this idea of the conventional path being a trap even further, describes the whole rat race thing as the world's main economic religion.
An economic religion? Like a cult?
Yeah, almost. Portrayed as an economic cult with its own specific script that's laid out for you through, well, various societal things.
Right, and he uses that acronym, SCRPT.
Yeah, SCRPT, schooling, consumerism, responsibility, ignorance, promises, and taxation.
Okay, let's unpack that a little for, someone listening.
Okay, so schooling, the source says, spends like 18 years just normalizing the Monday to Friday structure, basically training you for the next 50 years of work.
Setting the pattern early.
Exactly. Then consumerism links happiness directly to buying stuff. Starts with toys, escalates to cars, big houses, maybe even expensive weddings like Jeff and Sam had.
Which just piles on the debt, right?
Right. And that debt, college loans, mortgages, healthcare bills, that's a huge part of the responsibility and taxation bits.
Yeah.
It strips away your choices.
Forces you into labor just to keep up with payments. It's a system designed to keep you needing that paycheck.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The source introduces the honeypot principle.
Ah, yes, the honeypot.
The author argues that the most obvious trap, the default for most people, is just pure consumption. Work, buy, pay taxes, repeat, living paycheck to paycheck.
The standard grind.
But
Yeah.
the source says if you're smart enough to see that trap and try to avoid it, the script has this clever fail-safe a honeypot to capture you anyway,
Which is
becoming a fanatical savings rat.
a savings rat. So you mean like the conventional advice we always hear, save 10% for 50 years to retire rich, that's presented as another trap.
Exactly. Not the solution, but another form of the trap, according to this material.
Wow. Okay.
The source calls this the path of the mediocrity optimizing savings rat. You're still stuck in the grind, still trading your most valuable asset, your time, for money.
But now you're doing it for a retirement that's like 5 decades away instead of just living for the weekend 5 days away.
Precisely. The author contrasts working hard to live rich young versus working hard just to die rich old. It's framed as just another version of putting life on hold.
Just on a much longer time scale.
Okay. And this brings us back to the whole idea of time itself. The source talks about the discounted time principle.
Right. This is about the value of your time.
Yeah. It argues that trading 5 days of your life working for just 2 days off on the weekend is actually a negative 60% return on your time.
Negative 60%. That's quite a way to look at it.
It calls it an expressway to bankruptcy for your most finite resource. Time is the true great equalizer, right? Everyone gets 86,400 seconds a day.
Rich or poor, same amount.
The difference lies in how you value those seconds and how you spend them. Trading them directly for a wage at that kind of discount is presented as, well, a losing game.
Okay, so if you're in this situation, maybe feeling that comfortable pain, maybe you're even diligently saving but still feel trapped, how do you actually break free? According to this book, anyway.
Well, the source talks about needing a catalyst, something significant. It calls it a fuck this event, an FTE.
Right, the FTE, it's described as a traumatic or deeply uncomfortable event.
Where the pain of staying where you are finally becomes greater than the fear or the anticipated pain of trying to escape.
It's that moment. The comfortable pain becomes like acute discomfort.
Yeah.
The breaking point.
Yeah. And this is shown really clearly in the Jeff and Sam story again.
Their FTE wasn't planned, was it?
No, it was that double whammy, the 2008 stock market crash, then Jeff losing his job right after.
Suddenly, their comfortable pain, the dull dread, the wedding debt Sam keeps reminding him about it became acute.
Totally. No emergency savings, bills piling up. The thought of Sam having to work graveyard shifts just to keep afloat became unbearable.
That specific fear pushed them. It made them say, okay, this isn't working. We need a different answer.
Not just find another job or try to save even harder.
Right. And that acute discomfort, that FTE, it forces a really critical shift in mindset. The source calls this the profit-locus strategy.
Okay, profit-locus. It contrasts this with the usual approach, the wage-salary locus.
Exactly, where your income is directly tied to the hours you trade, which leads to, well, the author calls it poverty, or at best just being a skilled salary optimizer.
But the profit-locus is associated with controllable unlimited leverage.
Okay, controllable unlimited leverage. That sounds like a serious business jargon. Can we break that down a bit?
Good point. The source uses an analogy, actually. Think of the wage locus like walking a marathon in sandals, slow, painful, very limited.
Okay.
The salary locus is like jogging in sneakers, faster, maybe more comfortable, but still limited by your own 2 legs, your own time.
Right, that makes sense.
The profit locus, with leverage, is like taking a vehicle. Instead of earning money directly based on the time you put in, you build or use systems.
Systems that let you impact many people or handle many transactions at once.
Exactly. So your income gets tied to the value you create and the scale of your system, not just the hours you personally clock in. That's the leverage your effort gets amplified.
Ah, okay. So moving from trading time for money to trading value created through a system for money. Got it.
And the goal isn't just some vague retirement someday down the line.
No, precisely. The source is really insistent that the goal has to be specific and tangible, reaching your escape number.
Turning financial freedom into an actual number.
Yes, a concrete, calculated number.
Yeah.
It's the amount of liquid assets you need, invested so it generates passive income to cover your desired annual living expenses, plus a buffer.
Makes the goal real, measurable, something you can actively work towards, not just a fantasy decades away.
Exactly. And to navigate this new path, this material really hammers home the need for continuous learning. It talks about the knowledge gap strategy.
The knowledge gap. Meaning
that yesterday's knowledge gets outdated really fast. The gap between what you know and what you need to know to succeed is always widening because the world changes so quickly.
So you can't just rest on what you learned in school or even last year.
Absolutely not. You have to be constantly learning, adapting, getting new knowledge that's relevant to creating value now in the current market.
We see that starting with Jeff and Sam after their FTE, right? Jeff looking into Bitcoin.
Even if it wasn't their final path, yeah. And Sam searching for different answers in books. That initial hunger for new knowledge is presented as crucial.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. Based on these sources, what does entrepreneurship actually mean in this specific context? Especially for someone coming from that conventional job background. It's clearly not just starting any old business.
No, definitely not. It's defined very specifically. It's a process focused relentlessly on creating value and solving problems for other people.
The author calls entrepreneurs problemologists.
Right. It's about finding needs, frustrations, inefficiencies out there in the market and figuring out a way to address them effectively.
And this needs a fundamental shift away from what the source calls the Ptolemy money-chasing mindset.
Ptolemy, like the old Earth-centered view of the universe.
Exactly. Self-centered, where you're just trying to capture money for yourself.
Yeah.
You need to adopt the Copernicus mindset instead.
Sun-centered. So, market-centered.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You don't chase money, you attract it.
Mm-hmm.
And you attract it by orbiting around the market, understanding its needs, and creating value that solves problems for the market.
Money, in this view, is just a reflection of the value you delivered. Okay.
And a key concept in actually creating this value is the specialized unit strategy.
Specialized unit, like Sam's plant-based soups, heroic kitchens.
Precisely. Developing a specific product or service that not only has market demand, but crucially, can eventually exist and sell disconnected from your personal time.
And then you build a business system around it, the machine that takes that value unit and turns it into profit efficiently.
Right. And when you combine that value creation, the leverage we talked about, and an effective system, that's how you potentially achieve asymmetric returns.
Asymmetric returns, meaning your input doesn't equal your output.
Yeah. One unit of your work or input could earn you 5, 10, maybe way more units of pay. It's possible because your system, through leverage, impacts many lives or handles many transactions.
But the source is realistic here too, isn't it? It says achieving this requires matching your skills and resources with the right size opportunity.
Definitely. Trying to build the next Amazon with like $5,000 and zero experience. The source basically says that has zero probability of success.
So the advice isn't go big or go home right away.
Not at all. It's more like start smaller, find an area where you can actually build skills, gain momentum, increase your probability of success, and then gradually scale up as you learn and grow your system.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you're coming from that traditional job, thinking about building this kind of leverage business, what are some concrete principles from the source for getting started? One big one mentioned is becoming a productocracy.
Productocracy. Okay, but what's that about?
It's not just about selling anything. It's about demonstrating a unique and recognizable value skew.
Value skew, like what makes you different?
Exactly. Something that differentiates what you offer from everything else out there. Because if you just sell a totally commoditized product like plain paper or generic widgets, the only way to compete is usually on price.
Which leads to a race to the bottom.
Right. And the source argues that path leads to poverty. You need differentiation, that value skew.
And this skew can come from finding imperfections in what's already out there. Things that are broken, inconvenient, missing.
Yes, addressing those imperfections. But the source also warns about negative skew.
Ah, negative skew, things that kill your value.
Precisely. It means one seriously bad attribute, maybe your product quality is flaky, your website's a nightmare to use, your customer service is awful.
Or, as the source mentions, your brand gets unnecessarily political and turns people off.
Right. Any of those can kill your sales. Even if you have lots of positive things going for you, you have to minimize that negative skew. Protect the value.
This seems connected to the stakeholder principle.
It is. The source argues businesses often lose their way when they start prioritizing outside interests, maybe investors, Wall Street expectations, especially if they go public over the actual customer.
Which leads to cutting corners, reducing value, squeezing the customer.
Yeah. And conversely, prioritizing the customer, especially through really good customer service, often delivered by those frontline folks, can create powerful wow moments.
Wow moments.
Moments that positively violate expectations, going above and beyond what's normal in the industry.
Right.
That builds real loyalty.
Okay, another really practical principle the source highlights, especially for beginners testing ideas, is cache validation.
Oh, this is crucial. It's so easy to get caught up in what the source calls trivial validation.
Likes on social media, positive comments from friends, opinions from people who aren't even your target customer.
Right. Feels good, maybe, but the source is crystal clear. The only real proof you have a valid idea is cache.
Are people actually willing to open their wallets and pay for it?
Exactly. Pre-orders, actual sales, that's cash validation. The author puts it bluntly. High fives and likes don't pay the bills or put kids through college.
Jeff and Sam getting that first cash from selling soup samples at the fair.
That was their initial vital cash validation. It told them, okay, maybe there's something real here.
And building this kind of business, it's not presented as some quick thing, is it?
Not at all. The source hammers this point home. It's a process, not an event. There's a strong warning against looking for shortcuts or expecting instant riches.
Achievement comes from hard work on the underlying process.
Which means solving hundreds, maybe thousands, of tiny micro problems that all add up to the big macro problem of building your idea into a real working system.
The source also suggests something interesting. That businesses that are hard to create initially maybe take a lot of effort to build that specialized unit or system.
But then become relatively easy to replicate or scale internally. Those tend to offer protected leverage.
Yeah, because they're harder for competitors to just copy quickly. There's a barrier to entry you built.
Okay, so as you start building and maybe generating some revenue, how should you manage the money differently than someone stuck in the rat race script? The source introduces the financial army strategy.
Financial army. Sounds impressive.
It's about saving and investing cash outside of your main business, building a separate money system.
Like bonds, dividend stocks, things that generate passive income.
Exactly. Assets that generate income on their own. This capital allocation is presented as distinct from building wealth through your business equity itself.
Provides diversification, supplemental income.
It's like having wealth that's renting itself out to you, the source says. Different from just trying to compound tiny savings amounts over decades like the savings rat.
And within the business itself, there's the cornbread strategy.
Ah, cornbread versus champagne.
Right. Prioritize reinvesting profits back into growing the business that's the cornbread before you start splurging on personal luxuries, the champagne.
Feed the business first. Tight cash flow starves growth. Makes sense.
The source also touches on debt here, but frames it differently.
Yeah, not like the rat race view, where debt is often based just on affordability. Can I make the monthly payment on this car or house?
Here, debt can be a strategic tool, but it's based on its low cost, like a low interest rate if, and it's big if.
If you can use that borrowed capital to generate those asymmetric returns within your business, the returns have to significantly outweigh the cost of borrowing.
Right. Okay, the sources also definitely prepare you for challenges. There's a phase described as the desert of desertion.
Sounds bleak.
It's portrayed as this really difficult rite of passage, a period of intense struggle, maybe isolation, where motivation is hard to find, and it feels like life just keeps getting in the way.
And perseverance through that requires
things like a really compelling purpose, a deep why you're doing this, a stretching but still achievable goal, and consciously shifting into a growth identity.
Growth identity, meaning
deciding to be the person who can achieve this now, not waiting until someday when things feel easier or you feel ready, acting like the person you want to become. And you will face setbacks. The source suggests a 3-strike strategy for handling negative feedback.
3 strikes. Like, don't react to the first piece of criticism.
Something like that. Observe patterns. It distinguishes between just casual opinions and what it calls meaningful invalidation.
Meaningful invalidation. That's feedback from your actual target market.
Exactly. Critical feedback from the people you're trying to serve. That's the feedback you absolutely need to pay attention to and learn from.
And learning from what works for others can help too, right? Observed modeling.
Yeah, studying successful businesses or marketers in your field or related fields. Seeing what the market is actually responding positively to.
We saw that early on with Jeff's failed newspaper ad for the knife sharpening idea. That was meaningful invalidation. That approach wasn't working for the intended audience.
Right. And sometimes unexpected things happen that seem like major setbacks initially, but they can actually end up strengthening your resolve.
Like Sam finding out she's pregnant again, right after they'd fully committed to the soup business plan.
Exactly. That event, while scary, because it brought up all those fears of having to go back to the safety of the conventional job script,
it actually solidified their commitment in the end. It clarified their purpose-driven strategy.
Building a life of freedom wasn't just about them anymore. It was about creating that life for their growing family. That why got stronger.
So challenges, when faced with a strong purpose, can actually make you more determined. Interesting.
So, pulling all these threads together now, the source uses the Trotman's journey with heroic kitchens as this ongoing illustration.
Showing the principles in action.
Yeah. They identified a problem, Sam's veganism, lack of good soup options, developed a specialized unit, the soups themselves, got that crucial early cash validation selling samples.
Started building a system, the email list, eventually hiring help, finding distributors.
And eventually saw those potential asymmetric returns, like that $80,000 in sales from a single email promotion to their big list.
Wow. So the journey, as presented, it's definitely difficult. It requires constantly solving all those little micro problems.
But it offers the potential for both financial freedom and really meaningful work because you're creating value for others.
And the valuation principle comes into play too.
Right. As the business grows and impacts more people, its value as an asset increases significantly based on industry multiples, accelerating your net worth way beyond just the profit you take out each year.
The source contrasts the idea that fear betrays the past, letting past failures dictate your future with the potential you have right now in the present.
And it highlights the power of things like the big list strategy.
Building an audience you actually own, like an email list.
Yeah. Versus relying only on rented platforms like social media where you don't ultimately control access to your audience.
Yeah.
That owned audience is critical for direct marketing and getting that validation.
And maybe underlying all of this is the no permission principle.
You don't need anyone's permission.
Right. Not your boss, not your family, not society. You don't need anyone to greenlight your pursuit of this path.
Especially with the internet now, right? It's democratized the ability to create value, build a system, reach a market directly.
You can put your value out there, target the market mind, as the source calls it, and let it tell you how good your idea is through that cash validation.
Okay. So what does all of this really mean for someone listening? Someone who's maybe been in that traditional job for a long time, feeling that itch, just starting to think about something different, potentially escaping that conventional script.
Well, based on this deep dive into the unscripted material, I think it means, first, recognizing that the rat race isn't just a catchy phrase. It's presented as a system with specific traps.
Including that comfortable pain, the someday lie, and even the seemingly responsible savings honeypot.
Right. And breaking free involves a really fundamental shift in mindset, moving away from trading your finite time for money.
Towards creating leveraged value through systems you build.
It's about embracing that role of being a problem solver, becoming market-centered, not self-centered.
And relentlessly focusing on building something that provides unique value that others are genuinely willing to pay for.
And building those systems that can eventually operate somewhat independently of your constant hour-by-hour input. That's key.
It's definitely not presented as a path of shortcuts or easy money, though.
Not at all. It demands dedicated effort, focusing on the process, building that separate financial army for stability and diversification.
And crucially, having a strong, compelling purpose. That why that can carry you through the tough times, through that desert of desertion phase.
Yeah. The source makes a very compelling case, I think, that while this unscripted path is undoubtedly challenging, it demands perseverance, maybe some uncomfortable shifts.
It offers the potential for a level of financial freedom, control over your own time, and maybe fulfillment that the conventional script just doesn't provide.
Which, for you listening, kind of brings up an important question based on all this material.
If the conventional path is causing you what this source calls comfortable pain right now, what specific aspects of your current reality make up that discomfort for you?
And maybe, just maybe, what might your personal fuck this event look like? If it were to happen today, what could finally push you to seriously seek out a different way?
Definitely something to think about. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive.
We really hope this gave you some valuable nuggets to chew on from this very interesting source material. Until next time.